My name is Savannah Carter. I was 34 years old when I learned that sometimes the people who hurt your child aren't strangers. Sometimes they're family. Looking back now, most people think everything started with a bicycle. They're wrong. The bicycle was only the first crack. The real damage had been building for years. My son, Noah, was 10 years old. The kind of kid who thanked me for every little thing. The kind of kid who folded his clothes without being asked and left sticky notes on the refrigerator that said things like, "Love you, Mom." For months, he had been dreaming about a midnight blue BMX bike, not demanding it, not expecting it, just dreaming about it. I knew because he'd circled it 3 separate times in a catalog and kept looking at the picture whenever he thought I wasn't paying attention. So I worked extra shifts, skipped lunches, sold a few things I didn't really want to part with, including a ring from a relationship that had ended years ago. Every dollar went toward that bike. When I finally bought it, I spent nights in the garage restoring it, sanding, painting, polishing, making it perfect. His birthday was only 3 days away when it disappeared. One day, it was under a tarp in the garage. The next day, it was gone. No broken lock. No damaged door. No sign anyone had forced their way inside. Just gone. And deep down, I already knew who had taken it. My younger brother, Brandon. Brandon never asked for things. He took them. Always had. When we were children, he stole toys. As a teenager, he took our father's car without permission. As an adult, he borrowed money and conveniently forgot to repay it. The pattern never changed. Only the price tags did. I found him at dinner that evening, eating like he didn't have a care in the world. I looked directly at him. "Did you take Noah's bike?" He barely glanced up. His expression didn't even change. Then he shrugged. Ethan needed it more. Just like that, as casually as someone discussing the weather. I stared at him. Across the table, his son Ethan looked uncomfortable for half a second before lowering his eyes. Brandon kept chewing. Ethan loves it already. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. Something worse. I thought about Noah. About the way he'd whispered about that bike. About the hours I'd spent fixing it. About the sacrifices he would never know I'd made. And Brandon was acting like he'd borrowed a garden hose. "You stole it." He laughed. "Don't be dramatic." Then came the smile. That same smug smile he'd worn our entire lives. The one that always said he believed there would never be consequences. Noah will forget about it. I don't know if he truly believed that. Maybe he did. Maybe people like Brandon convince themselves of whatever makes their behavior easier to live with. I asked where the bike was. He told me Ethan had taken it to their apartment across town. Then he laughed again. This time, Ethan joined him. Something inside me hardened. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply stood up, walked away, went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and started planning. Because Brandon thought he knew me, he thought silence meant surrender. He thought calm meant weakness. He was wrong. That night, I opened my laptop and searched through old messages. Eventually, I found the man who had sold me the bike. I explained what happened, told him it had been stolen, asked if he remembered who bought it afterward. At first, he hesitated. Then he gave me what little information he had. A street, a house number, a rough description. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I opened a makeup case hidden in my closet. Behind the lining was my emergency cash. Money I'd promised myself I would never touch. I counted every bill twice. Then, a third time. Enough. Barely. But enough. 2 days later, I drove across town alone. The entire drive I kept replaying Noah's face in my mind. The excitement. The hope. The innocence. And every mile strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about a bicycle anymore. It was about what happens when people think they can take from your child and never pay a price. The house sat at the end of a dead-end road. Weathered siding, tall Viets, a rusted truck in the driveway. I knocked. A man answered, mid-40s, work boots, sunburned skin, the face of someone who spent his life outdoors. I asked about the bike. After a moment, he pointed toward the backyard. My stomach tightened. There it was, leaning beside a shed, covered in dust, but unmistakably mine. The paint job I'd worked so hard on was still there. The scratch on the left pedal, the tiny details nobody else would notice. I walked toward it slowly, as if moving too fast might make it disappear again. The man explained that he'd bought it from someone named Brandon. Said Brandon claimed it belonged to his kid. I told him the truth. The entire truth. He listened quietly, then asked if I had proof. I didn't. Not enough. But I had something else. I reached into my purse and pulled out cash. $150. Nearly twice what Brandon had received. The man looked at the money, then looked at me. Something in his expression softened. Finally, he shrugged. Take it. I almost cried right there. Instead, I nodded, thanked him, and carried the bike back to my car. As I strapped it into the passenger seat, my hands trembled. Part relief, part Rage, part exhaustion. On the drive home, I stopped at a gas station and sat there for nearly 20 minutes. Because the story wasn't over, not even close. The bike was back. But Brandon still believed he could take whatever he wanted. What he didn't know was that the money I'd just spent was the exact amount he'd been begging me for a week earlier. Money he claimed he desperately needed. Money I had quietly chosen to spend on my son instead. And when Brandon discovered that, everything would begin to change. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, I wheeled the bike into Noah's room. I tied a bright red ribbon around the handlebars and stepped back. For a moment, I just stood there watching him sleep, watching the rise and fall of his chest, watching the peaceful expression that children somehow manage to keep long after adults lose it. Then Noah opened his eyes. At first he looked confused. Then he saw the bike. The reaction was worth every sacrifice. His entire face lit up, not the polite smile children sometimes give when they're trying to be grateful. Real joy. Pure joy. He jumped out of bed and wrapped his arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe. Mom, is it really mine? I nodded. He looked at the bike again, as if it might vanish if he blinked. That moment alone made every mile of that drive worthwhile. Brandon came home later that afternoon. The second he saw the bike sitting in the hallway, his entire body froze. The color drained from his face. His eyes moved from the handlebars to me, then back again. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. Where did you get that? I continued folding laundry. You know where? His jaw tightened. Ethan said somebody bought it back. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. Then came the question I had been expecting. You still got that money I asked for. I folded another shirt. No. What do you mean, no? It's gone. His face darkened. On what? I finally looked at him. Fixing somebody else's mistake? For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The old Brandon would have laughed, made a joke, tried to charm his way through the situation. But something had changed. The confidence was cracking. And behind it, I caught the first glimpse of fear. The rest of the day, he sulked around the house, opening cabinets, closing them, pacing, muttering under his breath, trying to provoke an argument. I refused to give him one. That evening, Noah rode the bike until the streetlights flickered on. Every few minutes, he'd glance toward the porch to make sure I was still watching. And every time our eyes met, he'd smile. Brandon watched from inside the house, silent, like a storm cloud trapped behind glass. Later that night, he cornered me in the laundry room. You humiliated me. I kept sorting clothes. You did that yourself? Ethan was devastated. So was Noah. You're my sister. And I'm Noah's mother. That ended the conversation. Or so I thought. 2 days later, Brandon came into the kitchen while I was packing Noah's lunch. This time his attitude had changed. The arrogance was gone. Now he looked desperate. I need the money. Again. Brandon. No. Listen. This is serious. I asked what the money was for. His answer was vague. A business opportunity. A friend's investment. Something temporary. The story changed 3 times in 2 minutes. None of it sounded believable. I told him no. Again, that afternoon. After work. I met our cousin Olivia. She worked at a law office downtown. I explained the situation. 4 months earlier, I'd allowed Brandon and Ethan to stay with me temporarily. Temporary had somehow become permanent. No rent, no contribution, no respect. Olivia helped me prepare paperwork. A formal notice. 30 days to vacate. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, just facts. I printed it the next morning, placed it in an envelope, and left it on Brandon's bedroom door. When I returned home that evening, the envelope sat torn open on the kitchen table. Brandon was gone. So was Ethan. For 2 days I heard nothing. No calls, no texts, no angry messages, just silence. Part of me enjoyed it. The house felt lighter, cleaner, like someone had opened a window after years of stale air. Then, Sunday arrived. The front door opened unexpectedly. Brandon walked in, carrying a duffel bag. Ethan followed behind him. They both looked exhausted. I need more time, Brandon said quietly. I didn't answer. Please. It was the first genuine plea I'd heard from him in years. But I had spent too many years confusing guilt with responsibility. I wasn't making that mistake again. The date stays. His shoulders sagged. For a long time, he simply stared at the floor. Then he finally told me the truth. Or at least, part of it. The $80 from the bike hadn't gone toward groceries, or rent, or utilities. It had gone toward a gambling debt, a real one. The kind involving people who didn't enjoy waiting to be paid. I felt sick. Not surprised. Just sick. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The missing money, the panic, the lies, the desperation. How much do you owe? He hesitated. I asked again. 600. The number wasn't enormous, but for someone with no income, no savings, and nowhere stable to live, it might as well have been 6 million. He begged, promised repayment, swore he'd changed, swore he'd learned his lesson. I listened, then I said no. Not because I couldn't help, because I wouldn't. The money I had left was already committed elsewhere. Legal fees, protection, building a future for Noah, not rescuing another grown man from consequences. Brandon exploded. He accused me of abandoning him, of destroying his life, of turning my back on family. Then he made the worst mistake of all. Noah had been standing quietly in the hallway, listening, watching, trying to understand. Brandon pointed toward him. This is all because of that stupid bike. The room went silent. Noah froze. I watched confusion spread across his face, then guilt, and something inside me snapped. My voice came out colder than I'd ever heard it. Pack your things. Brandon blinked. What? Get out. The notice says 30 days. Not anymore. His expression shifted from anger to disbelief. He thought I was bluffing. I wasn't. For the first time in his life, he had aimed his selfishness directly at a child. My child. And I was done. 2 hours later, the front door closed. I looked out the window. His duffel bag was gone. Ethan was beside him. Neither looked back. The house became quiet, really quiet, for the first time in months. I slept through the night. I thought the nightmare was finally over. I was wrong. 2 days later, Olivia called. Her voice sounded tense. Savannah, I need you to listen carefully. My stomach dropped immediately. What happened? There was a pause. Then she said the words that changed everything. Brandon tried to open a credit account using your name. And suddenly, I realized the bicycle had never been the worst thing he was willing to steal. For several seconds after Olivia spoke, I couldn't process what I was hearing. The kitchen around me seemed to fade. What do you mean he used my name? Her voice remained calm, professional, the kind of calm people use when they're delivering bad news. He used your full name, your birthday, your previous address, enough information to submit a credit application. I felt my stomach twist. For years, I had forgiven Brandon for things I should never have forgiven. The money, the lies, the broken promises, the stolen bike. But this was different. This wasn't recklessness. This wasn't selfishness. This was deliberate. The only reason he hadn't succeeded was because he'd made a mistake. A small mistake. He listed the wrong employer. The bank contacted Olivia's office during verification because her firm had recently helped with paperwork connected to my legal matters. The connection raised questions that exposed the fraud before it could be approved. Had he entered one detail correctly? I might never have known until the damage was already done. That realization hurt more than I expected, because it meant Brandon hadn't merely acted out of desperation. He had planned it. I spent the rest of that day filing fraud alerts, freezing my credit, contacting banks, explaining the situation over and over again. Every call felt humiliating. Every form felt exhausting. By evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork, for the first time since the bike disappeared. Tears finally came, not because of the money, not because of the inconvenience, because my brother had looked at me and seen a resource instead of a person, a ladder instead of a sister, a name to exploit instead of someone who had spent years helping him. And that realization broke something inside me. A few days later, I received another call, this time from Ethan's school. Brandon's phone wasn't working. Ethan had missed several days of class. Apparently, my contact information was still listed as an emergency number. The guilt hit me immediately. Not for Brandon, for Ethan, because none of this was his fault. No child should have to carry the weight of a parent's bad decisions. The school informed me they believed Brandon and Ethan were staying at a motel outside town. After hanging up, I sat in silence for several minutes. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let the situation become someone else's problem, but another part remembered Ethan as a little boy, remembered birthday parties, family barbecues, summer afternoons, when the cousins played together in the yard. Eventually, I grabbed my keys. The motel looked worse than I imagined. Faded paint, broken ice machine, a flickering vacancy sign. The woman behind the desk recognized Brandon's name immediately. She pointed toward a room near the back. When I knocked, the door opened slowly. Brandon looked 10 years older, dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, defeated. For the first time in my life, he didn't look like someone expecting to win. Behind him, Ethan lay on the bed watching cartoons with the sound muted. The sight hit me harder than I expected. Not because I felt sorry for Brandon, because Ethan deserved better. I didn't waste time. I handed Brandon a thick manila envelope. Inside were copies of everything. Fraud reports, bank records, documentation, evidence. He looked down at the papers, then back at me. I can explain. No. Savannah, no. The word came out sharper than intended, but I didn't care. I had listened to explanations my entire life. Every lie came wrapped in one. Every betrayal came with a reason. Every mistake came with an excuse. I was finished collecting them. If you ever use my name again, I said quietly. I will press charges. His face went pale. I wasn't trying to hurt you. The statement almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. People always say they didn't mean to hurt you after they've already done it, as though intent somehow erases consequences. I looked toward Ethan, then back at Brandon. This stopped being about money a long time ago. He lowered his eyes. For once, there was no argument, no manipulation, no anger, only exhaustion. I turned toward the door. Then I heard him speak. His voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. I stopped. For a brief moment, memories surfaced. 2 children riding bikes through the neighborhood. 2 siblings sharing a bedroom during thunderstorms. The brother who used to make me laugh before life hardened him. Before bad choices became habits. Before excuses became his entire identity. For one dangerous second, I almost turned around, almost let myself feel responsible again. Then I remembered Noah standing in the hallway, believing he was somehow to blame, and the feeling vanished. I walked away. 3 weeks passed. No calls, no texts, no emergencies. Life slowly returned to normal. The tension that had lived in my house for months finally disappeared. Noah started sleeping better, laughing more, acting like a child again. Every evening he rode the bike through the neighborhood until sunset. The paint was already collecting scratches. The brake squealed occasionally. The ribbon I'd tied to the handlebars had disappeared somewhere along the way, but he loved it, and somehow that mattered more now than it had before. Then the letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. Postmarked from a town 3 hours away. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Brandon's handwriting. Messy. Uneven. As if he'd started writing before deciding what he wanted to say. I sat at the kitchen table and read it. Twice. Then a third time. The message was short. I messed everything up. Ethan's with his mother now. I know what I did. I know why you can't forgive me. Just don't let Noah grow up hating people the way I did. He still has a chance. I never did. That was it. No dramatic apology. No request for money. No promise to change. No attempt to justify anything. Just a confession. A quiet acknowledgement of the wreckage he'd left behind. I stared at the page for a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away immediately. Another part wanted to cry. Instead, I folded it carefully and placed it in the back of a drawer I rarely opened. I never showed it to Noah. Some memories aren't gifts. Some truths don't belong to children. I wanted him to remember something else. The bike, the freedom, the joy on his face when he first saw it. The feeling of racing down the street with the wind in his hair. The confidence that slowly returned after everything Brandon had tried to take away, because the bike had never really been about transportation, or money, or birthdays. It was about security. It was about knowing someone would fight for you. It was about teaching a child that love doesn't surrender when things become difficult. Brandon never understood that. He saw an object. I saw a promise. And in the end, that's why he lost. Not because I outsmarted him. Not because I punished him. Because I finally stopped protecting him from himself. Sometimes, the people closest to you can cause the deepest damage. Sometimes loving someone means refusing to save them again. And sometimes, survival requires closing a door that should have never needed to close. Brandon tried to take something from my son. What he lost instead was the last person willing to stand between him and the consequences of his own choices. By the time he understood that, there was nothing left to fix. Some things, once broken, never come back.